Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of Air India Flight 171. I'm Geoffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Godfrey in Germany. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon to you, Geoffrey.
So, viewers, this is a very special episode. It's called Root Cause. We have received over 100 detailed scenarios from viewers as to the probable cause of the crash of Air India Flight 171. All well argued, but all quite different. Today we're going to give you our analysis of the root cause of the crash. And it is a fascinating piece of work that Richard has done, and I urge you to watch this entire episode. We realise we'll get hundreds of comments that we've got it all wrong. We're making false assumptions, illogical statements, discussing fallacies rather than proven facts, and we are speculating without evidence. We should also wait for the final report, which will see correctly or incorrectly Boeing blamed, or GE, Air India, the pilots, ground handling, maintenance, FAA, NTSB, AAIB, DGCA, the Indian government, the Americans, the Tata Group, etc. Richard, let's start by reviewing the key events and facts in the causal and temporal sequence.
Yeah, we're showing a screenshot of the table of key events, and we start from liftoff at 08:08:39 UTC, and I've called that T plus 0 seconds in the time in the table. So the rat deployed as evidenced by the figure 15 in the preliminary report. And we know that both engines shut down and eventually were relit. We know that both fuel switches were moved to cutoff and eventually back to run. The ADS-B data stopped abruptly after 8 data items had been sent within 4.32 seconds. The APU auto start sequence began. We know there was a Mayday call, and 5 seconds later, there was impact and the aircraft crashed. So you can take a look at this table, and you will find in the description below a technical note with all of the information we're providing today, all of the screenshots, all of the tables, and you can even download an Excel spreadsheet with the key data.
So, Richard, one of the key questions not answered in the preliminary report was when was the rat deployed and why?
Yeah, so we're showing a screenshot of the preliminary report CCTV screenshot. And we're just told in the preliminary report, this is figure 15, CCTV screenshot of rat deployment. The rat was clearly deployed in both the screenshot and the close-up picture. But as you correctly point out, Geoffrey, what time was this screenshot taken? And we're not given a clue in the figure 15 in the table in the report. In the text, we're told, as per the EAFR data, both engines' N2 values passed below minimum idle speed, and the rat hydraulic pump began supplying hydraulic power at about 08:08:47 UTC. A reasonable assumption might be that the screenshot was taken at 08:08:47 UTC. It turns out that this assumption is wrong, and the screenshot was actually taken a little bit later, in fact, another 2.5 seconds later, to be precise.
Richard, how can you be so sure about the time that the screenshot was taken?
Well, we have now been able to synchronize the preliminary report FDR and ATC data, which is given to the nearest second, plus or minus half a second, with the flight radar 24 ADS-B data, which is given to the nearest millisecond, plus or minus 1 millisecond, as well as the airport security CCTV frame-by-frame footage. And that footage is run at 29.921 frames per second. So that's accurate to the nearest 33 milliseconds. There is also in the description and the technical note a link to the Ahmedabad Airport aerodrome chart, and it will be useful to download that as a reference document when you go through the technical note. So if you look at the preliminary report screenshot carefully, you will see in the background there are 8 floodlight poles at Ahmedabad Airport International Terminal 2. And the exact position of each of these floodlight poles can be seen in Google Earth, and they're included in the technical note. The CCTV security camera is located in the Indian Air Force area adjacent to the end of the runway 23. There is also the surface movement radar tower and taxiway K clearly visible on the pictures. And if you look at the Ahmedabad Airport, you will see in the aerodrome chart the surface movement radar and the taxiway K.
So where was the screenshot taken from?
So we're showing a map of the IAF area, the Indian Air Force area. And it has its own separate apron and office and hangar on the other side of the runway from the passenger terminals. There's a national and an international terminal. And we're showing another screenshot with the close-up of the IAF apron, which has distinctive markings on it, and the surface movement radar tower is also clearly visible. And all of these screenshots are in the technical notes, so if we flip through too fast, don't worry, you can still look at them at your leisure after watching the episode. Now, we then drew a map of the CCTV screenshot view, and that is the view as depicted in the preliminary report. The white lines on this screenshot define the field of view. The yellow lines end at the position of floodlights 2 and 4. And those floodlights 2 and 4 mark the nose and the tail of the aircraft as it passes. The red line on the runway marks the position of Air India Flight 171, and that happens to be exactly the same position as one of the ADS-B data points at 80849.5. In fact, the ADS-B is at 461 milliseconds after 080849. And we get the exact position, latitude and longitude from the ADS-B data, and that is 229 meters from the end of the runway. And we're showing a screenshot of what the ADS-B data says. And that is taken at around 08:08:49.5. And so we can see it's almost exactly 2.5 seconds after the rat hydraulic pump began supplying hydraulic power at 08:08:47, according to the FDR data. Now, there's a detailed timeline included in the technical note with the latitude, longitude, and altitudes of each point, and you can download that data as an Excel spreadsheet. Bear in mind the Flight Radar 24 altitude is given above mean sea level and at the international standard atmosphere of 15 degrees centigrade and 1013.25 hectopascal. So you'll have to convert to above ground level with the actual temperature and air pressure at Ahmedabad Airport. The aerodrome chart gives the elevation of the runway, 189 feet above mean sea level at the start and 180 feet above mean sea level at the end. And the preliminary report also gives the air temperature and air pressure every 30 minutes during this phase.
Richard, the screenshot in the preliminary report shows no dust or smoke. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we're showing a screenshot comparing the preliminary report with the airport security CCTV frame. And both of these pictures side by side exactly at the same time. And you will see that the dust or smoke has largely dispersed and has probably been blown by the aircraft vortex quite a way behind the aircraft. However, if you look 2 or 4 seconds earlier, it's a different matter. And we're showing another screenshot. And this time the top picture is 2 seconds earlier, and the lower screenshot is 4 seconds earlier. And there is clearly some light gray smoke to be seen.
So, what are the possible root causes that the rat deployed just 2 seconds after takeoff and before the fuel switches were moved to cut off?
Well, there are 6 possible root causes, and we're showing a table of these 6. And let me walk you through each case. The first case is EE Bay water ingress. I put the likelihood of that as high because we know the rat deployed 2 seconds after rotation. And at rotation, if there is any accumulation of water, then it will start to flow as the aircraft nose points upwards. And we also know there was a simultaneous shutdown of the engines. They did relight later. And the other evidence I would put is there is an airworthiness directive 2025-09-12, which points out the danger of this water ingress into the EE Bay and the possible catastrophic effect that it might have. So that's the favored high likelihood scenario, but there are several others. A shared DC bus failure is a moderate likelihood in my view, technically possible, but it does require the rare event of a simultaneous contactor failure. Then there's an IPC fault, which is either a breaker, circuit breaker, or arcing, and that could affect both FADECs, but there's a lack of timing support, and there's also no supporting service bulletin or airworthiness directive on this particular failure. So I put that likelihood as low. Then there's a software controlled isolation. There have been no known cases, and I think that is also speculative without any service bulletin or airworthiness uh, directive or history of such an event. And then there's two which I've ruled out. One is the GCU software overflow after 248 days. We know for a fact that the aircraft was powered down 140 days prior to the accident because it went through a complete maintenance check. And at a maintenance check, you have to power down the aircraft completely. So that happened 140 days ago. So then the 248-day overflow can't happen. And then there was another issue, a service bulletin 24/212 was issued with a PRBA connector problem due to water ingress. This turns out to be a fake Boeing service bulletin, and we pointed out that in a previous episode. And I find it strange that people have to put out fake Boeing service bulletins, but it is so obviously fake because it says the PRBA connectors are in the aft EE bay. Well, actually, they're in the engine pylons on the left and right engine.
Mm. So, with all of that, Richard, what's your conclusion?
Well, the conclusion is the most likely cause of the accident involving Air India Flight 171 was water ingress into the electronic equipment EE bay during rotation. And that led to a simultaneous electrical disruption of the EEC and the FADEC and the electrical power buses feeding both FADECs and both EECs. And this resulted in a near instantaneous shutdown of both engines at low airspeed and low altitude. And due to the extremely limited energy margin, there was insufficient time for the FADEC-controlled engine relight sequence to restore thrust and to prevent a loss of control and terrain impact. It takes at least 20 seconds, if not longer, for the engine relight sequence. So, in my view, the root cause was not pilot error. There may well have been some discussion in the cockpit between the pilots about who did what and when, but it was not the root cause. I think they were taken by surprise. And this event was preventable. It points instead to a failure in the maintenance oversight and non-compliance with the FAA Airworthiness Directive 2025-09-12, which specifically addresses water ingress into the EE bay and the need for improved cabin sealing. For more information on that, you can take a look at our episode titled Water in the EE Bay, which was episode 174.
Mm. Well, that's an amazing analysis, Richard. Some fabulous work there. Very, very impressive. And I'm sure we will get lots of analysis, questions, queries from viewers. Because we've got some very technical minded people out there, and I'm sure they'll have something to say either in agreement or possibly in disagreement with that analysis. But it's a very, very compelling analysis. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And one of the things that struck me about the pilot scenario was that the discussion that we were given by the preliminary report and the ATC report of thrust not achieved it just didn't sound like a pilot human factors type of reaction at all to what was going on, and that to me just didn't flag a pilot issue. Um, but yeah,
I
so
think, in one sense, we were led to believe that
yes,
by lack of information in the preliminary report. And I'm surprised how many experts who are pilots or knowledgeable of the aviation industry immediately jumped to the conclusion that this was primarily pilot error,
mm,
and many jumping on human factors and a deliberate act by
mm,
one of the pilots. So
mm.
uh, I I beg to differ.
Yes, I agree with you. Absolutely, I agree with you. So, viewers, thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it illuminating and enlightening. Um, Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep the questions coming, and please keep those wonderful comments coming. And tomorrow, Richard and I will be taking questions on your analysis or your thoughts on this particular episode. And once again, Richard, thank you very much indeed for this fantastic body of work. It's really outstanding.
You're very welcome.
And viewers, please tune in tomorrow when we have a good hard look at your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. Thank you very much.